I had a woman say to me once, she was an only child. Her parents had died. Her aunt had died in a 2 or 3 year period. She lost 4 or 5 people. So she had rented all these storage units and she had everybody's stuff in it. She couldn't get rid of it. And she was paying all this money that she couldn't afford to. And at one point she just said, I'm so tired of being the museum for the world. And this burden that she had put on herself, that she felt like she had to keep everybody's stuff to show they existed. And I see that so much, that people are so burdened by other people's stuff and they're stressing themselves out. They're spending money they don't have. They're making their own homes not functional because of some china cabinet somebody had 100 years ago, and truly burdened. So that's a big conversation. Like, how do you keep the memories? How do you acknowledge the person and also not have to be the keeper of their stuff?
Hello, my friends. Thank you for being here today. It's time to make space for a vibrant conversation with the CEO of dClutterfly, Tracy McCubbin. We are about to find out what it's like to run America's top decluttering service and to help thousands of people make space in their lives for the things that matter, and literally and metaphorically clean out the things that are holding them back from living their best lives. Tracy did a life pivot when she started her career in decluttering, leaving her former role working for a big-time TV director to follow a clearer vision, an uncanny ability to see through a mess. And she started her own gig, helping other people to achieve both physical and mental clarity. I, of course, love a good reinvention story as someone who reinvented my own career, and this is a topic close to my heart, and I know also to so many of you who are also on that path. Tracy is here to show us by example, and with her amazing tips and tools, that you can make space to call in that environment and that life that you have been wanting. Welcome to Blessings, Tracy.
Hi, thank you for having me. And can I hire you as my PR agent? Oh my golly, I feel so pumped up this morning. I'm like, I have done a lot. I am fantastic. That's
You
great.
are.
Thank you.
That's the thing that
It's so
stands out.
lovely.
When I listen to other people speaking with you, that is the thing that stands out to me. You're just like a ray of sunshine. So I can't wait to bring that to everyone today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Yeah. And we're kicking off the new year. We're starting into this new year. And I think that my goal for this year is that to really, everything's so heavy, and to help people change their relationship with their stuff, but in a positive way. Like, we're doing this to be better and to be happier, not because we're wrong and not because we're not perfect.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. So we're going to dig into your story, but I wanted to start with kind of a deep question to get those wheels turning. Are you ready for me? Okay. What is something that you wish more people would notice in normal everyday life that is really extraordinary?
What do I wish that people would, that's really extraordinary? Nature, awe, awe. I did, I took Dr. Laurie Santos's course. She teaches a course at Yale, but you can take it for free, called, I think it's called Hack Your Happiness by Dr. Laurie Santos. So you can take the course for free. And it's all about science-based ways to hack your happiness. And one thing she said is that studies have shown that the biggest predictor of happy people are people who experience awe in nature. And that if you are in a time where it's hard for you, if you can go and do that. And so oftentimes when I'm working with clients and we're in a really difficult spot, I'll be like, let's just take a walk. Let's just go outside. Let's put our feet on the ground and let's look at a tree. Let's look at the sunset. Let's just have a moment. So I think we get so busy and I got to eat dinner and the kids and my aging parents, and that we just forget that this earth is extraordinary.
Yes, absolutely. I'm 100% with you on that. I even take off my shoes so I can have my bare feet touching the earth when I go outside and do that.
Yeah, I'm bodies of water. I have to, unless it's dangerous, I have to put my feet in every body of water I come up on.
Isn't that weird how we're drawn to that? But it's such a beautiful thing because it really is our essence. Like it is our true nature to want to connect with the natural world. I guess we really want to be happy.
We do. We really, I think that even people who are dealing with mental health and people who are dealing with that stuff. At our core, we want to be happy. I get that we're just diving right in. I get asked a lot of people, there are a lot of people out here that are concerned that they're hoarders, that they have hoarding disorder. And it's such a new, it's really only in the last 10 years that they've figured out this is a disorder. And I think for so many people who are struggling with clutter, it's actually a byproduct. It can look like hoarding disorder, but it doesn't have the OCD component. And it's just, you've been dealing with depression. You've been a caregiver for an aging parent. You've been raising, like, all of a sudden, when things get really tough, it gets really hard to manage your stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, it does. And I have some questions for you specifically on hoarding and a couple of things in that vein. But let's just set the stage. So, can you just give us some info on your background? Where were you born?
I was born on an Air Force base in Biloxi, Mississippi. And then my dad and mom and I moved to Germany while he was in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And then we moved back to Davis, California, which is in Northern California, while he went to law school. And I was very, very much a product of 1970s California, very the hippies and personal development. And that was always a conversation. And I was also very close to my one grandmother and a set of grandparents. I never knew one of my grandfathers, and they were raised farmers. They were my family in Central California, ranchers, farmers. So I really was raised in this get it done farm ethic. I know how to sew, and I was really taught. All my grandparents lived through the Depression. They lived through World War II. They were very frugal. You fixed it. You kept it for a long time. You didn't buy new things. And so it was just a part of me. I always joke that my company is like your auntie for hire. Because I remember when my grandmother, the aunties would go around and everyone would do spring cleaning in each other's house. And they'd go as a little pack, and that kind of roll up your sleeves and help. But really focused on maintaining the things that you have.
Yes, I was raised in a very similar family, and so I can relate to that. I love that you know how to sew. I've been very into that. Recently, I picked up my sewing machine again for the first time in decades, just recently. And so it is a skill. Those kinds of skills really do serve you well in life. Do you have a specific story about maybe something your grandmother taught you or something like that, something old
Oh,
school?
yeah, I have a lot. One of my grandmother's favorite expressions, it's actually the foreword on my first book, is don't put it down, put it away. Like, one of the best ways to stay on top of clutter next to having less stuff is putting things away. When you dump them on the dining room table, you dump them on the kitchen counter, you not only made more work for yourself because now you have to think about and put it away, but also it's piling up. So that was such a great, that was just how you did it. You just put things away. You didn't leave laundry in a basket. You put it away. That grandmother, I was very close to her, and she was born in 1911. So she had immigrated from Scotland. She'd lived through everything. And my grandfather had been away in the war. And in my grandmother's house, I tell this all the time, like, when I was growing up, there was a box of Band-Aids. It looked like Band-Aids in the medicine cabinet. They were always there, but they looked different. They didn't look like modern Band-Aids that had a big red cross on them. They were there. That was just part of my grandmother's medicine chest. And I scratched my eye one time when I was a teenager, and my grandma was like, "Oh, this is perfect. I have an eye patch in there. We'll go get it. We'll put it on your eye. We take you to the doctor." And I was like, "How do you have an eye patch?" And she says, "Oh, your grandfather brought it back from the war." My grandfather fought in World War I. So I grew up around people who held on to things, yogurt containers, rubber bands. So it's this always, for me, and working with clients, it's always the conversation about what is enough? What do you actually need? How can you have what you need in your house without having to buy more? Like, how can you use what you have, but then also not being chained to it, that I've got to keep every yogurt container, I've got to keep every jar. Like, it's a very interesting road to navigate, but always in the end thinking about the sustainability, right? When you throw something away, where's away? Where are you throwing it?
Right. Oh my gosh, there's so much there's so much in there that you just said. I can relate to everything that you just said, but I want to know when that happened to you, how did you feel about having that eye patch? Were you excited that it was there, or did you have the realization of, wow, this is I can't believe she's held on to this for that long?
The interesting thing about that, I think this is the benefit of hindsight. So I had an uncle, her brother was truly a hoarder. Like we would stop at the gas station before we went to visit him to use the restroom because there was no using the restroom in his house. And then my father is also a hoarder, an extreme hoarder. And so I've grown up around true hoarding disorder. So I think in looking backwards, it's, oh, there are different veins. Like for my grandmother, it was, well, this was perfectly good. Why would you throw it away? You use it versus this other thing. I think at the time I was like, I'm not putting that old disgusting thing on my eye. We laughed a lot, so it was fine. But I think even then, this realization, like, oh, my uncle's different. This isn't just saving things. This is extreme.
Yeah. Yeah, you could tell the difference. When you were growing up, when you were in school, as an elementary school person, as a high school person, can you just talk a little bit about your personality? What kind of a kid were you?
I was a cheerleader starting from 9 years old. I loved it. I was a really happy kid. I think I was, it's interesting. And there's so much conversation about it now. So I'm 58. So I grew up in this, basically the 70s and 80s. And I look back on, especially elementary school, so many of my report cards. She's bossy. She talks a lot. All these traits, and mostly interesting, came from women teachers,
Mm,
older women teacher. And now later in life, I'm like, oh no, I'm not bossy. I'm a boss. I run a company. And understanding that these things that I really was raised, trained in school that were bad traits because I was a female.
I can relate. I was remembering the other day, I had an experience when I was in second grade, and the teacher put some tape over my mouth. Apparently, I had been talking too much. And I remember that I don't remember what I did or what I said or how it happened, but I remember sitting there with the tape over my mouth and tears streaming down my face, and I couldn't speak. And I remember how that felt.
Terrible.
It was
I
terrible.
was and I was very lucky. I got put in a gifted program in fourth grade, and I had two female teachers. That's where things really started to change, where they were very supportive. My still to this day, my best friend, we met when we were four, and we did that. We went through school all together, and same thing, both of us, forever getting in trouble, bossy, know-it-alls. And she runs a huge company now. But those two teachers in fourth grade were the ones that really encouraged, saw that as leadership qualities, not. And
Yes.
so it's been interesting. It's been really interesting. And when I meet other women who are in a leadership role, you're like, you got the same report card I did. We all got
Yep.
it. We all got it. And then, but I was lucky. I grew up in a very, there was a university in the town I grew up in, and it was very education forward. And I went to UC Santa Barbara. I had a great college experience. But I've spent a lot of time wrestling with those criticisms from early on. Like, you talk too much, or to be like, no, those are fantastic traits.
Mhm. Isn't it interesting how a teacher can make or break parts of our personality from such a young age?
Mr. Newman, my choir teacher in fifth
Okay.
grade, told me we were singing, we were practicing for the Grandparents' Day concert, right? That's it. Just grandparents can't hear anyway. And he stopped and he said, who is making that racket? And then he made everyone sing out loud. When he got to me, he said, I want you to just mouth the words. I'm
Oh,
traumatized. I've worked with a vocal coach to have like belief in my voice. Yeah.
oh my God. That
I
is awful. And
know.
that triggered a
A
whole thing that you
lifetime.
had to actually work with a coach to overcome.
Mhm. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So my very first book, I narrated the audio book, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do this. And they were like, hey, you can. It'd be great. I was like, and I had worked with a coach, and I was like, oh, it stems all the way back to that.
Amazing that you could make the connection. A lot of people don't. This is one of the things I do in my work, is to help people go back and find those root causes, because that's how you can treat it. That's how you can clear it in your world. Clear it out is by seeing it. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with what you're doing in your life, has so many parallels to what you do in your work. Clearing out, making
So
space, finding the foundational causes of things, and all of that. It's just fascinating. I
it's
love that.
fascinating. And especially I do so much of that with clients. So much of it comes up because what is the source wound? What, especially when it's what's people's story about money and poverty and buying. And I work with someday, my next book, though, I don't think anybody's going to want to publish it. So just write on my blog. But I'm always fascinated at people's heritage and their relationship to stuff, meaning where were they raised? Like, I can tell you someone who was raised in the Midwest. I can walk into their house and know someone who was raised in the Midwest versus New York City. Geographically, where were they raised? Were their parents immigrants? Was someone in their family a Holocaust survivor? Like, those things have such an impact on our relationship to our stuff. And I think that one of the things people have such, in my experience, have such shame around their inability to manage their stuff or to have too much clutter. And a big conversation is, where did it come from? How were you raised? How did your family deal with it? And looking at that, I
Yeah,
think
our stuff really tells a story.
100%.
So when you get
100%.
rid of something, you're getting rid of, in your mind, maybe getting rid of a part of your story. How do you keep the story part without keeping the object?
And then add on to that your own story, but then add on to that when people pass away. And so you want to keep their story. I had a woman say to me once, and it just stuck with me. I was doing a speaking engagement, and this woman was talking about sort of everything. She was an only child. She was 50s or 60s. Her parents had died. Her aunt had died. Like, basically in kind of a 2 or 3 year period, she lost 4 or 5 people. So she had rented all these storage units, and she had everybody's stuff in it. She couldn't get rid of it. And she was paying all this money that she couldn't afford to. And at one point she just said, I'm so tired of being the museum for the world.
Mm.
And this burden that she had put on herself, that she felt like she had to keep everybody's stuff to show they existed. And I see that so much, that people are so burdened by other people's stuff, and they're stressing themselves out. They're spending money they don't have. They're making their own homes not functional because of some china cabinet somebody had 100 years ago.
Right.
And burdened, truly burdened. So yes, that's a big conversation. Like, how do you keep the memories? How do you acknowledge the person and also not have to be the keeper of their stuff?
Yes. It's a delicate balance, and it's a lot of work, psychological work, to be done in that conversation. Wow. All right. Yes. I have some things that are popping into my mind in my own family.
Yeah, and look,
Especially the china cabinet. I know, I was going to have this as a question portion, but I'll just bring it up, is that I also have someone in my family who is a hoarder, and there is furniture from this person's mother, and there is all kinds of stuff. And it's pretty interesting because there are rooms in the house where you can't use them. People can't stay there. The guest rooms are completely full, and there are pathways. That is, I know, one of the signs, if there are pathways. But there is also a section of the house that is the part that's for parties. That's usually pretty good. And it's interesting because it's not being addressed, even though I've brought it up and other people have brought it up, because now it's a part of the identity of the household. And now other people who live in the household have been brought into the identity. So then they assimilate part of the blame. They say, oh, I'm doing it too. It's really not really the case. But the interesting thing is, though, if I need a size 2 knitting needle, or if I need a disposable rain poncho, or if I need a packet of strawberry jelly, this person will have that. And
yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So hoarding disorder. First of all, let's just say to everybody who's out there and listening, if you are worried that you have it or someone you love has it. There's a lot of amazing resources. There's a fantastic book called Buried in Treasures by Dr. David Tolan. It's a really good starting place. He was the first pioneer of separating hoarding disorder from OCD. They had thought for years that it was just a symptom of OCD. They often go hand in hand, but they are different. So that's a great place to start. There are tests online. It's a very tricky disorder. People who have it tend to be very smart. I think, and I do not have a degree in psychology, I am not in any way, I think that there is an addiction component. I think the people that hoard are addicted to it. I think they get a dopamine hit when they find the thing that they are looking for. I think that's a big part of it. And that's what I've witnessed from my own life. I also think that I think it's a way that people have built literal wall around themselves to not have to feel their feelings. With hoarders, they're always busy. I'm going to clean up the closet. I got to deal with this stuff. It's a way to not sit with their feelings. And oftentimes when you work with them, it tends to be an archaeological dig into people's trauma. You see where things happened. It's very hard to help a hoarder that doesn't want to be helped. It's very difficult. Like yelling and screaming and cajoling. And if you've ever dealt with an addict or an alcoholic, it's very similar. Until they want help, until the way that they're living isn't working for them anymore, it's very difficult. And yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. And it gets in the way of people having true relationships, I think, and being truly connected, because there's always something in between. And in some ways, it's a bit also disordered eating in the sense of you can quit drinking. If you're an alcoholic, you can quit drinking and your life will be much better and your health will be fantastic. If you have disordered eating, you can't quit eating. So if you have hoarding disorder, you can't quit stuff, right? You need a bed to lay on and a couch, and maybe you want to watch TV and a pot to cook in. So it has that real grip that it's just so easy to slip back into it. It's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of help. Cognitive behavior therapy has proven very successful with it, a rewiring of neural pathways, which is a bit why I think there's an addiction component to it.
Yeah.
And the intervention comes when someone ceases to be safe in their own homes.
Yeah. And I think people can teeter on the edge. They can maintain a facade that everything is okay. And it's only the people that really know what's behind that door.
Yeah.
And I see that dopamine hit you were talking about because, in my family, people will ask for something, they'll need something, and this person will have it. And that does create a little positive thing between us. It's like a way of connecting instead of criticizing. It's a way of saying, all right.
And it's also a way of justifying their behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
It's also a way of saying, look, I got this. This is why I save everything.
Yep.
It's like I could have gone to the knitting store and gotten a number 2 needle, but it's definitely a way of justifying. See, I knew this was going to happen. I knew someone was going to need this one day.
Right. And that's because they've lost the other one, but they only have one of those needles and they've saved it.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's an interesting thing and it is very sad. And I know there's a connection to trauma in my family to this behavior. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
It's tough. And the thing that they say about it is that as people experience more trauma, it can get worse, that you see a spike in it. But for people who are listening, if it's a concern, mental health support, mental health, and it's so hard. It's so embarrassing and you look like you don't have it together. But there are also a lot of people who, if you're worried about it, do some research, figure out, because there is a very big difference between a mother who's going through postpartum depression and just can't get the laundry done. And I think this word gets tossed around so much, like, oh, I'm such a hoarder. You're not. So I think if somebody's listening and they're concerned, do a little research. There's good information out there and get a clear path. Is this something I'm really dealing with, or is it a symptom of something else?
Yeah, good advice. I just want to ask you the question as we're talking about your childhood and people's possessions and things that people collect. Do you have any objects from your childhood that you've kept?
I do. Funny. I have my furniture. My parents in 1965 bought a whole set, like a bar, a desk, a secretary, two credenzas, all this beautiful mid-century Danish furniture from Denmark. So I have all of that. I have photos. I just have a few things, but I don't memorabilia to me. I don't know. I don't have that kind of same photos are very for me to see a photo. And by the way, since the advent of Facebook, it's like I don't even have to keep all those things from high school because there's like people I grew up with. I grew up in a tiny little town. Thank you. They keep all the stuff when they place stuff on Facebook. You're like, oh, I saw that. But I don't really have a bunch of memorabilia.
What do you think it means when people have to hold on to that? And I love the word memorabilia, or also the idea of collections. What is it about people who, when they need to hold on to things or to create a collection of a group of similar items?
I would break that up. So people who collect, I think that again is the dopamine. You go on a quest, you find a thing, you get the from finding the thing, you add it to your collection, and then the next thing that you can add. I always tell people like have collections. Here's a perfect example. I was working with a client whose father had made birdhouses. It was his hobby, and when he died, there were hundreds, and they were pretty. They weren't anything spectacular, but they were nice. And she just was like so wrapped around the axles, like he spent all this time, and I'm going to have to sell them to make the time that he spent worthwhile. And she was going through all these gymnastics, and I said, "Look, he chose to spend his time that way. He never gave them away. He never sold them. So clearly, that's not what he cared about. He cared about for him it was." Meditative, relaxing, whatever. You're not beholden to his hobby. You're
Mm.
not beholden to his hobby. Keep one or two that you like and off the rest go. So I think that's the thing about collections. And look, if you, I get it, part of the hunt. If that's fun for you and enjoyable and you like collecting things, and great. But when it gets obsessive, when it gets financially, it's just like any behavior in our lives. When we lose control of it, when we just have got to get that, got to go on eBay every night, got to find that thing and got to do that. And I always feel like I know in my own life, there'll be something, an article of clothing or something that I got to find these shoes and where are they? And it's often tied that there's something else going on because it's like something that I don't feel in control of. My mom and I have had this joke for years that every time you have a big event, you're obsessing about what dress you're going to wear and buying the dress. And you realize you just have the anxiety about the big event, but you can't say that's happening. You're like, I got to find this dress. I got to find this dress. So it's always just peeling back the onion and what's going on with me that I'm in this behavior.
Mhm.
Not good or bad, not wrong, right or wrong. What's going on with me? So that's my feeling about collections. Memorabilia, if we keep a lot of memorabilia, it tends to message to ourselves that our best days are behind us. Like if you have all your trophies from when you were in high school and you look, I'm not saying wipe your slate clean. And I'm not saying my memorabilia is my friends. I have friends that I've been friends with since I was 4, and shared memories is great. But what is going on that the past is so much more that you're sacrificing your present for the past? What is the situation that you're paying $300 a month for a storage unit for all your old college textbooks, which are now out of date, which you have the degree that you graduated? What's going on there? That's what I'm always interested in. And I think it's always about something else. The root of the thing is never the thing itself.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, very interesting stuff there. A couple things. One, I love the idea of digging into what's behind collecting things because I think about when I was a young mother and the big thing was the Longaberger parties, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
started to collect these Longaberger baskets. Now these were $200, $300 a basket.
Oh yeah, I
It
know
was
them very well. I have
and
decluttered
I
many a
had so
Longaberger.
many of these baskets. At the time, I probably had a couple $1,000s worth of Longaberger baskets. and they're worth
and
nothing.
correct me, but and aren't Longaberger Bass, wasn't that an MLM?
Yes, it
Mhm,
was. So there's
mhm.
that aspect of it as well. But that's I guess my question is, and the same thing, I know my sister, she had collected the Precious Moments statues. She has hundreds of them, and she at one time tried to sell them, and nobody wants the damn things. Like,
Here's a news flash to everybody. The word collectible is a marketing term.
that's the thing. Are they preying on us?
Yes,
Are the people, yeah.
yes, yes, yes. They are preying on you. Disney adults are being preyed on.
Oh,
It is a marketing tool. I have to pull the quote. I'm reading this book right now called Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And there was a quote about memorabilia. They designed video games, and there was a quote about memorabilia that it was just marketing made to make you feel like you had to have it. And yes, it's all this Stanley water bottle craze. I don't even understand.
oh, that's funny. I
One
don't
should
even know about it. I've heard that
they're
it's
just
happening, but I don't know. I don't like those. I would never even want one.
but also to me, it's have one if it's the water bottle that you love. Have two. But people are buying hundreds and like trampling to Target, and I'm like, I don't. This is a craze.
They think they're gonna be
I,
worth something someday. They're like, it's like a false assignment of value to something, like the Beanie Baby
oh,
craze.
I was
I mean,
just gonna
people who
say I
save their
have
Beanie
cleaned
Babies in
out.
the case with the tag on, and then that story about the Beanie Baby who sold for $5,000. That's not gonna
Here's the
happen
thing.
to
It's not
you.
going to happen. But first of all, there's a fantastic documentary about the creator of Beanie Babies. So watch that. And it is marketing. And your your used Stanley Cup is not going to be worth something. Here's what things are worth in true money: what someone will pay you cash for today. That's what it's worth. So this idea of I've been doing this for 17 years. I've cleaned out thousands of homes. Very, very rarely is something worth something.
Right. Yep.
Very rarely. I just cleaned out a house. They downsized beautiful furniture, like 1920s. 4 auction houses were like, no one beautiful, but no one's buying that. So this idea, this magical thinking, which is what it
Mhm.
is, of this Beanie Baby I'm going to buy. I've cleaned out storage units where people have been paying to store the Beanie Babies, right? And so that to me is truly magical thinking. Your old furniture is not going to be art sometimes, but I also say buy the art that you love having on your wall. This idea that I'm going to buy and also that really gets into the idea of people hanging on to ancestor, dead family members' furniture. This is going to be worth something. It's old. It's like old does not equate valuable. I had a client one time. She was very much that she had been told this story from family members that her grandfather had lost all their money. So there was very much, we used to be rich and then we lost everything, and all this stuff that we had from when we were rich is now valuable, right? So there was that whole story. And she had these chairs, and there were like 12 of them. And she had been told her whole life that these were from the American Revolution and these were the most valuable things in the family. And she's, look, they're even in a book and these have to be worth something. And I was like, I don't think so. She was pregnant at the time. She was like, I'm going to take them to some of the auction houses every once in a while, do free appraisal days where you get up at 5 a.m, you stand in line, you bring your thing and they appraise it. She shoved it in her car and drove down there pregnant and stood in line. And the guy was like, huh? Yep. Old. Yep. American Revolution, absolutely. They have no value. And she's, what do you mean? These were mass produced. These were made by the seers of the time. There's a lot of these out there. And I think that's the pain. You could tell I get passionate about this. People have to understand with old stuff, like old magazines, they're old books. Like,
How
it's
many
like they
people
were
saved the National Geographics, the Reader's Digest?
all the people save their National Geographics. Everyone say, and I'm like, I just give them to teachers so the kids can cut them up and use them for art projects. I'm like, no one wants this. They're like, aren't we going to send them to the soldiers? I'm like, soldiers play video games. They don't want your National Geographic. What do you do? We have the internet. Like, and that's part of it, is that we have, in the last 20 years, our access to information has skyrocketed. It's so different. But this conversation about hanging on to this old stuff because you think it's going to be, it's magical thinking. It's magical thinking. And what are you paying to store it? Literally, are you paying for a storage unit? Can you not park your car in your garage? Or emotionally, do you have a house full of things that you don't like? Somebody else had them and you think that you should hang on to them. That's one of the biggest conversations I have. I'm like, do you love it? Like, I love my parents' furniture. I love it. I think it's cool. It's super well designed. I love it. But people are like, oh no, I hate that thing. And I'm like, why are you hanging on to it? It might be worth something someday. I'm like, it's not. Stop watching Antique Roadshow. Stop watching it.
I know. That's funny. I know someone who did the Antique Roadshow and actually did have something really valuable, but it was just a one-off like object. But
Yeah,
it's such an interesting thing.
And I think the other thing with that is, and absolutely that does happen. Believe me, we've seen cool things, but you also have what I see people have is they keep these things, they think they're valuable, and they don't do their due diligence, right? If they did a little bit of research, they would go, oh, there are 100,000 precious memory figurines for sale on eBay right now. They don't want to know the bad news. They want to stay in their magical thinking. And I tend to come in being the bearer of bad news. I'm like, nobody wants it. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to pay money for it. Nobody wants to pay money for it. I had a client, you'll appreciate this story. I had a client who lived out here in LA, and her mother, she had to put her mother was in St. Louis, Pittsburgh. I had to put her mother into senior living pretty quickly. So she had to go out, and she had a husband and kids and a job, and she had to go and do it really fast. And she had a house full of furniture. And she said, it's good furniture. It's not of the time. It's a little dated, but it's in great condition. I don't have time to have an estate sale to get a little bit of money for it. I can't bear to throw it in the dumpster. I don't like what I got to get home. And I said, look, you grew up there. Do you have family? She's like, yeah, we have a big family. And I'm like, do you have a family network? She's like, yeah, we have a Facebook page. And I'm like, throw it up on the Facebook page. See what happens. So she put everything up there. And one of her second cousins was like, my daughter just moved into her first house with her husband. They barely could afford the house. They showed up with a U-Haul with a bunch of friends, took it. And my client was like, that's all I wanted. I just didn't want to see it go in the garbage. I wanted to know that someone would use it. And she freed herself. She did a mitzvah and helped somebody else. And she wasn't burdened by chasing after this $25 that she was maybe or maybe not going to get.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a couple of things there. One that really comes to mind is I think it was Bob Proctor who talks about if you don't want something anymore, the idea of instead of trying to sell it for a couple of bucks, just give it away to someone who can use it, someone who will need it. That's an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset.
1,000%. I had a client, this just cracks me up. He had a pretty nice fridge in good shape. He did some remodeling. He didn't need it anymore. So he put it out on the street with a sign that said free, and it sat there for 3 days. And he changed the sign to say $25, and it was gone in an hour.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. Wow. I can the idea of having like bigger objects too. Like when I moved, I downsized, my kids left home and I downsized my house, and I had some very large objects that were from when I was a little girl. Like I had a very big doll house that my dad had made, and it was something that I love, but it was enormous. And I was jamming things in a storage unit, and I was in that boat. I don't know. I needed to make decisions about what things to keep. And I actually ended up finding someone who took it from me. And the way that I got through that guilt and the feeling of giving away the sentimental object, but that was a really large object that I didn't want to carry around with me for the rest of my life, was that this person was telling me stories about how she was going to renovate it and she was going to do this with it and this with it, and it was going to be for her little girl. And it just made my heart feel so happy that this object was going to someone who was going to continue the tradition that I probably wasn't going to continue. Like, how do I know my grandchildren in 20 years are going to want this enormous dollhouse? They probably
and you were going to also shove it in a storage unit that you were paying for. And then I say this all the time to clients, when you let go of something, trust that the person who needs it will get it. I have had so many experiences, things like, I can't even, like things where literally people have dropped from the sky and needed that thing that my guys happened to be taking out of our van. I was in a parking lot getting a sushi roll one day. I just come from a client And she had decluttered a whole bunch of the AA books, the big book. And I had them in the back of my car, and I was going to take them to an AA meeting and drop them off. And there was a woman in front of the grocery store who was taking donations for a women's shelter. And I don't know, I just started chatting with her because she was there and nice. And she said something that was like, I'm working my step, something. And I was like, oh, this is so strange. But I have a trunk full of AA workbooks and the big book. And she was like, had just left a domestic abuse of violence, had no money, had not been able to buy these things, was like working from photocopies. I literally went in my car, and she was like, when I came out with my groceries, she was like working this. Just trust that the thing that you let go of will get to the person who needs it. And you are not its steward. It will happen. It just does. I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's a beautiful example of something in ordinary life that's extraordinary that happens just by default. So I'm curious about how you assist people with knowing what kinds of things to keep and what kinds of things to go away. So I want to give you an example. As legend has it, they say that when they asked Michelangelo how he created the statue of David, he basically said, I just took this big hunk of marble and I removed everything that wasn't David. So how do you know when we over-identify with objects and they become part of our identity? How do we know what things to take away and to carve out of our lives to create that statue of our lives, that sculpture of ourselves that we're trying to create? Like, who do I want to be? Who am I creating?
It's great. A couple conversations that I have with clients all the time is what's working. I believe our home is a tool and our stuff is a tool. So you have beds you sleep on, you have pots that you cook dinner with, these things that you use that are tools. And then your home is full of things that you just love because they're pretty to you, right? They make you happy. I have some framed photographs that I just like to look at them. They make me happy. So it's first of all, identifying what in your house is a tool that you actually use, and what's your vision for your house? What's your vision for your life? Your stuff is a time suck. You have to take care of it. You have to clean it. You have to repair it. You have to put it away. You have to deal with all of it. So do you want to spend your life managing your stuff? And so once we start to get really clear on what do you want your house to be? How do you want to live in your house? It becomes really clear. I had a woman whose husband had passed, and she was getting to the point where she was ready to start dating again. And we were doing her closet. And I was like, every piece of clothing, I was like, would you wear this in front of your new boyfriend? And would you feel cute and happy in it? And she'd be like, no. And I'm like, then why are we keeping it? Let's step into this future that you want. And so that also goes back to when you're keeping all these things from the past. Are you really respecting your legacy, or are you holding yourself back? Are you telling yourself your best days were behind you? And so when you start to look at that work, how do you want to live in your house? My husband is amazing and I love him. And he's just the kindest, smartest, funniest person I know. He's so messy. He's universe. You are hilarious that you did this to me. I'm like, of course you did. Why wouldn't you do this? And he's so clean. Our house is so clean, but he's really messy. And we moved into a smaller house for a short period of time. So we had to store some stuff at my warehouse. And I realized the other day, I was like, oh, he's not messy anymore because we just have less stuff. Like me, it like hit me. I was like, oh, it's just so much. He just manages so much better when he has less stuff. And he's not particularly attached to anything. But I was like, when I removed all this away, and I realized that fight or whatever the conversation that we would have about put your stuff away and why are you leaving? I was like, oh, we're not having it anymore because he just has less stuff. Yeah. So I think it's really getting clear about what's the goal for your home, for your family, for your partnership, for yourself. What's the life you want to be living inside of your home? And does your stuff support that?
Yeah, it reminds me of the 80-20 rule. Like in business, you focus on the 20% that's going to move you to be who you want to be, where you want to be. And it's also about decision fatigue. It reminds me of the Trader Joe's model. They only have one ketchup. You don't have to
Yeah.
decide what kind of ketchup you need. There's
Clutter is a constant decision making. Every piece of everything you have, if you live in the world, I talk about this all the time with clients. I'm like, you're in decision fatigue. And then you have all this other stuff on top of it. And you have to decide, where does it live? Do I still wear it? Do I like it? Do I want it? You're just piling it on top, which is one of the reasons I think that people are so addicted to late night shopping, because it's just a simple decision, right? Oh, blue or red? I'm going to buy it, not buy it. But yeah, clutter is 100% delayed decision making. And when you want to know when it's really tough is when you have to deal with someone else's stuff. When somebody you love pass away and you've got to clean out, you've got to make those decisions for them. And so many times people say, I have to save it because my mom saved it, so it must have been important to her. I'm like, or maybe she just saved it because she didn't want to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's no hidden message. Maybe it's just she didn't deal with it. Just shoved it in a drawer and off she went.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it's really looking at, how do you want to be living your life and how do you want that to show up inside your house? Once you get clear with that, it's like you said, the rest of the stuff just falls away.
Yeah, it does. And I love that, and helping people to see it more of in a positive way. When people's houses are messy, they say mean things to themselves. Oh, I'm such a slob, or my house is a wreck. It looks like a bomb went off, or it looks like it's been ransacked. We just go to these negative default phrases instead of saying things like, oh, well, my house needs a little extra love today, or my closet is so full.
Who's great at this conversation too? There's this woman, Casey Davis, and she's fantastic in this space. She's the one that has said care tasks, so doing laundry, dishes, are morally neutral. You're not a good or a bad person if you don't get them done. And I had seen that and said a version, but she said it so eloquently. If you can't get your dishes done tonight, you're not a bad person. You just couldn't get your dishes done. When I think we are so hard on ourselves, and I see that in organizing too, where people are like, it looks like this on Pinterest and these people, and I'm like, okay, first of all, they did it for the photo, and all those other people that you see on Instagram, pay someone to do it because I'm the person they pay. So it's like that time that Jamie Lee Curtis did that magazine cover and she didn't wear Spanx and she didn't wear makeup. She put like the cover photo next to her reel. And it's the same thing. I'm like, I know those houses look like everybody else's houses until I get there. And then, so this idea, you're living up to something you're beating yourself up for not living up to something that's not real.
So how does creating physical space tie into opening up the mental space for the things that you want to really come into your life?
Nature abhors a vacuum, right? So it's going to fill a space. So if you've got a space already filled up, what can come in? This is a great example. Let's say you used to paint and you want to get back into painting. You've taken up sewing. If you have a room in your house that is so full of stuff that you don't even go into it, or you call it the storage depot or the dumping ground. But if you cleared all that space out, you could set it up as a sewing studio. You could turn it into a painting studio. You could literally make space to do the thing that you wanted to do. You also make space in your head that every time you walk past that house, that room in your house, you're not thinking, oh, I got to clean that out. Oh, I'm so lazy. I can't. It's occupying your time. Think about when you travel. I always say this, and George Carlin did a fantastic bit on it. But when you travel, you're not thinking about your stuff at home. You're not like, oh, I really miss that vase. You're like, oh my God, Dublin is amazing. So I feel if you can approach your home in that way, but we have so much going on. We're so worried about everyone else. We're so worried about ourselves. I have aging parents. Like that's a whole new thing that I'm like, oh, I got 10 more years of this, 15 more years. Like it's on my brain all the time. And so the less stuff, the more that you get to just be, and you just get to invite in.
Yes. Yep. The mental clutter is just as inhibiting as the physical clutter sometimes.
Exactly. Yes, it's the mental clutter. It's the decision making. It's all mental. It's all mental. And really going down into what you're feeling about it, right? What are you feeling about? Are you feeling shame? Are you feeling overwhelmed? And the great news about it is that you can change that. You can change your space. It's really something that there's such an immediate change, which is one of the things I love what I do. You can go in and help someone for 4 hours or a weekend or 2 days, and you can absolutely change your space.
You can.
It's great. It's great. And I've had people get jobs and meet people and get pregnant and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it opens up things you don't even expect, things that have nothing to do with what you're even looking for, things that just magically
yep, magically appear. The immediate one is people finding lost things.
Yeah.
They're like, that's where that went. My girlfriend texted me the other night. She's like, whenever I declutter, I thought I had lost this ring. I thought this ring was gone. And I did a whole bunch of decluttering and I found this ring. So, it's really, I think when you realize how mentally taxing clutter and your stuff is, that's such a great way to look at it. Like when you realize this is taxing, this is taking away from me, not adding to me. Do I want this? Do I want this in my life?
Yeah.
And It's all and also remember this for people, it's varying degrees, right? Like someone may be comfortable with more stuff. I say that to my clients all the time. They're like, how do you do it? I'm like, it doesn't matter how I do it. I don't live in your house.
It's a choice, and
what works for you?
It's about making personal choices. It's almost like a different way of tapping into your identity.
Really?
It's just not who the world told you should be, or not who your stuff is telling you who you should be, but who you actually want to be. Not the gifts that, all this 50 millionth Eagles jersey that somebody bought you, or the grandfather clock that you hate, that you don't really want to put out, but your grandmother got it for you for your wedding. Stuff like that.
Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And it's really,
what's really you? Like, what's the essence? What do you love? Who are you? That's the beautiful thing. Oh my gosh.
And then look, if you love roosters and you want a collection of roosters, knock yourself out. But I think this is an important point to leave everybody with, is that it is within your power. You have the power to make these choices. And it's about awareness and acknowledgement. What do I want from my life? What do I want from this short blip of time that I'm on this planet? Who do I want to be? Not who do people tell me I have to be? Who do I want to be? And does my home and my stuff reflect? Am I in integrity with that? Am I in integrity with who I want to be and how my house is?
Yep. Alignment.
Yep.
So
when you get aligned,
I know, and everything just works out. It is really magical that way. And it does really happen. It does. Serendipity.
Yep.
Make space for it. So I have to ask you before we close, if you could point to one or two of the biggest lessons that you've learned on this journey. You've learned a lot. You've given us a lot. But what can you sum up with a lesson?
That stuff does not make you happier. More stuff does not make you happier. It just doesn't. I'm all levels of it. People, lots of stuff. People, this stuff does not make you happier. It'll make you happy in a moment. You get a little dopamine hit. You feel great. The stuff will not make you happy. And the other thing is when I work with my seniors and when I clean out a lot of houses after people pass away or downsize seniors into different kind of living, they never talk about the stuff. They talk about the memories. They talk about the experiences. It's my favorite part of my job. I love it. But they talk about the trips they've taken and the grandkids that they have or the lovers that they had. No one really talks about, because what happens is they'll start to talk about the stuff, but then the stuff becomes a story, usually about a relationship.
The stuff becomes a story. So maybe before you get rid of something, you could write down the story and keep a book of stories. And then the object doesn't have to remain. The story will be there.
And you can also, guess what? You can also take a photo.
Yeah.
You can take a photo and have that photo and have an album in your photos that they're called memories. And if you want to look at that China hutch and remember, then look at that China hutch.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wow. So much to unpack in this conversation. I feel like we could have talked for a long
I know. I'm a little, I think we have to do part 2.
I think we do, because I still have questions. I didn't tell you about the time I cried in Neiman Marcus the other day for a pair of shoes. Anyway,
I think people need to comment and write in and tell you if they want part 2. I feel like we've got.
I would love to do part 2. Yes, absolutely.
Me too.
This is
me too. I feel like we scratched the surface.
We did. And besides that, I just love talking to you. You're such a great person to talk to. You're the kind of person I want to come over and sit down with over coffee and just talk about.
I would love it. I would love it. I will happily come back anytime.
Thank you, Tracy. Oh my gosh, you've been fantastic. I love this conversation so much. It's been great. And I appreciate you and everything you're doing in the world, putting such good things out there in the world. That's what it's all about. So thank you for being with me, with all of
Thank
us.
you. Thank you.